Greetings and welcome to the MU2605 class session for Friday, April 24th. This is our penultimate class session on the students and how do we know they learn. As is typical, I like to begin with a little musical selection. I've played for you recently a composition of mine titled Song for the Wind that I wrote for the alto recorder. Well, recently I've been experimenting with the a cappella app, and many of you have seen the virtual choirs and some of the really cool things that people are doing musically, whether collaborative or as kind of these like multi-track audio-visual presentations. Well, mine's not great, and the music is not spectacular, but I'm proud of it because I learned something new in technology. So this is my quick presentation of Song for the Wind with some of the illest tambourine choreography you'll ever see. Here we go, a little Song for the Wind. Well, if you made it through that whole thing, thank you. You're truly a good sport. Let's get into our content for this week. This is chapter 11, the final chapter for our class. And so give me just a second here and let's go. All right, I already shared Song for the Wind with you. So a few initial thoughts on assessment. First of all, it's not synonymous with grading. Grading is something that is a little bit actually more specific and serves different purposes. Assessment is something that would account for factors really that go beyond those for grading, and sometimes some of those factors in grading are not necessarily content specific. For example, some teachers may grade based upon participation, and that's fine, but it wouldn't typically be a criterion for assessment. Assessment is also not necessarily numeric. Many of the more formal evaluative measurements that we conduct will involve numbers, but often we assess, for example, informally, through providing more qualitative kinds of feedback. We listen to students' musical performance, and then we give them some kind of a feedback that is still what would be a formative kind of assessment. More on that in a little bit. Then finally, what is assessment? Well, it involves gathering evidence about what students know and what they're able to do with respect to some of the goals, objectives, and the standards that we have in place. And these are not like state standards or national standards, but rather what are the standards of achievement that we've set forth for the particular musical experiences. Okay, so why should we assess in music? Well, believe it or not, there are entire volumes on assessment in music education. You can see the one here edited by Dr. Tim Brophy, who was my doctoral advisor, and I was privileged to contribute one of the chapters in this book. But back to the question, why should we assess our students in music class? Well, first and foremost, with the purpose of improving student learning. Assessment gives us evidence of where our students are, and it provides us potentially some ideas for how we might improve our instruction for the better of the students, and that leads to the second reason, so that we can inform and enhance our instruction. Also, assessment can facilitate program development. So if we look at things in the grander scheme, assessment can tell us about how our students are doing, how our program is doing overall, and can help the growth there. And then finally, because assessment informs stakeholders, to be quite honest with you, you will be called upon to assess your students. It's a matter of being music teaching professionals. You'll have administrators who require that you provide evidence of how your students are, how they're progressing. And a big part of that will be actually assessing student progress. And that's something that you'll learn more about as you progress through the degree program. Okay, what are some of the types of assessment? Well, they would include, but not be limited to, the informal observations that we conduct of our student musicianship. I spoke about that a little bit ago. Formal tests of knowledge, tests of skill. So, for example, playing tests. I'll show you a rubric in a little bit that might be implemented for an improvisation assessment. And then we should involve students in self-assessment and peer assessment, and there's quite a bit of value in those kinds of experiences. We also have diagnostic assessment of student, what I said earlier, student progress. And this would be one of the key kinds of assessment that you're, again, in the schools will be really concerned about, you showing progress or student growth. We also have evaluations of the curriculum, and those are the more kind of let's see, larger scale, broad and more global kinds of assessment that give us a larger picture of how our program is currently performing. And then teacher evaluation, and many of these pieces may funnel into the teacher evaluation piece. So some forms of assessment include diagnostic, formative, and summative. Diagnostic would happen before instruction. So for example, if you're an instrumental or a choral music educator and you have a new student come into your program, you may ask them to play or sing for you a little bit so that you can place them in the appropriate ensemble. And then the bulk of what we will do would involve formative assessments. These take place during or after instruction, and they inform, again, we said what some of the purposes are, and these formative assessments, that's really what they are, is that they're going to kind of form how we shape music teaching and learning. And they would necessarily include feedback. They might also be formal or informal. They might involve measurement, or they might not. They might be more qualitative, as I mentioned previously. And then the summative assessments are those that take place after instruction, but they do not call for feedback. These are typically more the standardized type tests that students take in schools. They're most appropriate for program assessment because they might give us that larger scale kind of picture of where a group of students are with regard to expectations, but they would also serve, according to the author, serve little purpose in the classroom. So again, the bulk of what we do as music educators is going to involve formative assessment. Some principles to share with you before we end our quick excursion on assessment. Some things that I believe assessment should. Well, one, it should directly relate with instruction. Assessment needs to be relevant, and it needs to be valid, as the authors made really clear for you. So it must be linked. We should be assessing according to the things that we're truly teaching in the classes. It should serve specific purposes. And again, we're thinking about, okay, how is the assessment informing us? How is it informing our students, their parents, and perhaps our administrators? Assessments must be fair, and students should be informed throughout the process. If the students are being assessed, they should know with what purpose, and they should know what would be the criteria so that they can, they want to have an awareness of, okay, well, what is it that I should be doing well as a musician, or what is it that I should be accountable for in terms of what I know. Assessments should also be variable. They should include different formats so that we can capture the different kinds of learning styles of the students with which we'll work. And they should address a range of knowledge and skills. So we should be looking at different points of the year at assessing certain key pieces of knowledge that we want our students to have, and then for example, music literacy, and then what are their abilities with pitch, with rhythm, maybe with more creative kinds of endeavors like composition, improvisation, etc. And then previously I mentioned the importance of self and peer assessment. There's a really nice description of a large ensemble who developed their own assessment, or actually I think they said the teacher developed it, but then the students came back after the concert and they completed the assessment. And a lot of you have done this because the schools, I think, frankly, are getting much better at engaging in self-assessment, whether it's individual or for the group, but then also assessment of our peers. And the research really shows that there's great value in both of those kinds of assessment. And then assessment should also inform our instruction, and it should inform our programs. This really relates back to that second item of serving specific purposes. Some components of rubrics. This is the last kind of piece that I thought, well, rubrics are really being used with greater frequency these days. So let's look at this one particular sample of an assessment. First, what would be the components of a good rubric? One, it would have a task objective with a description. It would have specific criterion or criteria. These are the things that we want for the students to be able to demonstrate. And then it would have levels of achievement. So for example, it might be below expectations or meets expectations or exceeds. And then there should be descriptors for each of those achievement levels. There should be a method for selecting the appropriate level, and then there should be a location for comments. So let's take a look at a rubric. In this case, it's a bi-level multi-criteria. And what that means is there are two achievement levels, namely below expectations or meets expectations. So that's the bi-level, and then it's multiple criteria because the criteria are pitch accuracy, phrase length, and expressive intent. This rubric was for the assessment of 4-measure pentatonic, la pentatonic improvisation with accurate pitch and expressive intent. So what are the components again? Well, we had that task description. I mentioned the 3 criteria, the 2 achievement levels, and then a space for comments. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is an example of a rubric that could be implemented really in a lot of different music teaching settings, but specific to students' improvisation ability. Oh, also, yes, don't forget the level descriptors, because for the sake of reliability, we want to be able to know, okay, what does it mean for a student to be below expectations on pitch accuracy? Or what does it mean for them to meet the expectation on those given criteria? Okay, so I've got some final words before we send off here. This is from the latter part of the textbook, and if you didn't read beyond chapter 11, I really encourage you to check out some of the material. There's some really good, again, words of wisdom. So let me share this with you. You might be exhilarated at the prospect of entering such a dynamic and gratifying field. You're equally likely to be fearful about the gravity of taking on the responsibilities of being a professional music educator. Most likely, you're experiencing a combination of these emotions that flux with each question that enters your mind. Because there are so many questions, some prospective music teachers begin to have reservations about their suitability for the music teaching profession. We would like to state very clearly that having a wide range of questions concerning your professional development is very healthy and appropriate. It shows an honest respect for the career you're about to enter and that you are seriously considering what that process entails. Few more words of encouragement. One. Let's see. Can I read this? I can't really see the top line because of my screen share. Let me just call out there. If you're currently contemplating all sorts of questions about teaching music, you're likely right where you need to be in your professional development as a music educator. Better than 1,000 days of diligent study is one day with a great teacher. And finally, great music teachers make our world a better place in which to live. I've cited the page numbers of some of these quotes, and if you're curious to read on more, please do look at that section again beyond chapter 11. Okay, a few announcements before we sign off. Coming up, school teacher observation should be done. It's due tonight. I'm filming this on Thursday the 23rd. It's due at 10 p.m. We will have a Zoom meeting next week. So on Friday, May 1st, I would like to call everybody together at 9 a.m. for one final meeting. It's going to be a little bit less formal, just kind of talk, chat. We might look at some of the benefits of music ed videos. And then I do have an important document to share with you on navigating through the music education degree program. So I do want to take a few moments to look at that with you. Friday, May 1st, I will send out a Zoom invite and I will continue to remind you about that meeting. Final exam the week after, Friday, May 8th, between 9 and 11 a.m. It is synchronous, so you have a 2-hour window to complete what will be probably about a 50-item select response exam. Open book, open note, but work independently. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend. Be safe, be healthy, and I look forward to seeing everybody next Friday. Take care.